Hello everyone, this is Ponder on Weather. In this update, we've got Arctic air on the way with big changes are in store and even a snowstorm heading into next week. So let's take a look at the overall jet stream this morning on the North American view, and you actually see the remnants of what was Hurricane Ian that just basically parked itself off the Jersey Shore. Yesterday, they saw relentless rains all day and just a chilly rain right off the East Coast. And they're getting it this morning in a big way. So places into Jersey, into New York City, back into portions of Connecticut, Rhode Island, all those areas are going to be impacted from the remnants of what was Hurricane Ian, now just kind of a hybrid low pressure system. This is actually the remnants of Orleans that made an impact in portions of Mexico yesterday as a Category 1 hurricane near Mazatlan made landfall. Now you just kind of get the leftover and the monsoonal flow that's still going to be impacting this area. But further to the north, we do have some Arctic air lurking up in Canada. So let's take a look at the overall big picture for the tropics, because there's things happening out there as well. Right now, we've got Invest 91L, and it's actually got more organized in the overnight hours. That's continuing westbound into the Western Caribbean in the days ahead. But here is, now that Orleans gone, we've got actually another storm out there, which is Tropical Storm Paine. So it's just been a relentless area of just supply of tropical systems, hurricanes out here in the Eastern Pacific. There is the remnants of Orleans yesterday, and this is along a cold front that's going to be sinking southbound. And there is the remnants of Ian this morning, pounding portions of the Northeast. And that's going to bring some heavier rains this afternoon. And that actually extends into tomorrow as well. So there's a lot happening in the tropics. So let's take a look closer to home and take a look at some of those temperatures this morning as of 7 a.m. Yeah, it's a chilly rain. Those are widespread 40s along the coast there, with a really just damp and just nasty raw day and a good chunk of the Northeast with the remnants of Ian. But widespread 30s this morning in portions of the Ohio Valley, while much of the rest of the country experiencing some of those cooler, crisp fall-like temperatures. But you can actually see that 61 degrees in northern Minnesota. That's going to be changing in a big way of days to come with our first initial push of Arctic air pushing southbound. Here's the water vapor imagery this morning. You can actually see where the low pressure is funneling into off the eastern flow here into portions of the Northeast. They're going to be getting impacted with all that heavier rain for today. There's the actual cool front that's going to be seeking southbound, and then the Arctic front is lurking further north. So back behind it, as we go into your Thursday time frame, you can actually see it's pushing southbound. So now those widespread 60-degree temperatures this morning in Minnesota are going to be changing in a big way with the freeze. Some of your coldest temperatures of the season is going to be definitely dropping southbound as we get into Thursday, Friday, and going into Saturday morning. You can actually see by Friday, October the 7th, this is the overall jet stream by then. Look at the buckle. Look at the buckle and the jet stream pulling down from Canada, sending the coldest temperatures of the season, a good chunk of the Dakotas, parts of Minnesota, Iowa, back into Wisconsin, as well as Michigan. That'll sneak into portions of the Ohio Valley and the Northeast, and even pull as far south as portions of Missouri, getting into portions, even Kentucky. Some of those areas could be seeing those first freeze and first frost and freeze of the season going into this weekend. So underneath that, by Friday, you can see that colder air mass pulling in from Canada with the ridge of high pressure pretty locked over much of the West and the Pacific Northwest and much of British Columbia, well above average temperatures. But under just to the east of you, you've got some of that first initial push of that Arctic air, and definitely by far the coldest temperatures of the season. Underneath that should set up shop into portions of the Dakotas, back into the upper Great Lakes by then. And that cold air mass will just only seek southbound as we get into your Saturday, October the 8th time frame, as well below average temperatures will continue to push as that Arctic push from the north to the south, and then we'll bring some of those colder temperatures, and obviously the coldest temperatures of the season for many areas in portions of the Ohio Valley, getting into the Northeast. And what's going to stand out from this is with that cold air in place is all the dew points. There's a lot of a dry air back behind it. And all these dew points are going to be settling in the teens and even not in the 20s. That gives you an idea with some calmer winds that are going to be in place as well. The temperature could fall closer to the dew point, and that's going to set up a lot of you for seeing your first freeze and first frost of the season as you push further southbound, because the winds are going to go light. So back behind that first initial, the coldest temperatures of the season, these winds up here in a good chunk of the Ohio Valley and portions of the Tennessee Valley are going to be just near dead calm. And with that colder push from the north, that typically sets up what's known as radiational cooling. So when you have a cloud cover, that actually acts like a little space heater. So here's an image to depict what radiational cooling is. And if you have higher winds, the winds usually keep the heat from rising. But in a night like this, where it's going to be setting up with clear skies and calm winds, the temperatures actually taken about 6 feet off the ground. So as the winds tend to go calm, they tend to get closer to that dew point, like I showed you, as nothing will be able to hold that heat in place. It'll actually sink. It'll actually allow that with the radiational cooling from the atmosphere to the surface, and a lot of these areas could be experiencing some of their first freeze, if not frost, of the season the further south you go. And we won't have a snowpack in place, but if we did, that would add about 10 degrees cooler in a night like this with the healthy snowpack in place. So we should be seeing, by the time we wake up on your Saturday, October the 8th timeframe, much of the upper Great Lakes and the Ohio Valley will be close to your wind chill, and your actual temperatures will be just about the same with all those calm winds in place and that radiational cooling. So most of these areas that are showing up in the low 30s, if not in the 20s for a good chunk of the upper Great Lakes, some of these areas have already seen your first freeze of the season, will be pushing further south, and places like Missouri could be looking at their first frost, places even in Kentucky, and even portions of the Tennessee Valley with some of those first frost and freeze of the season. But yeah, it's a pretty chilly air mass for your October 8th time frame. So that's going to be a welcome sight for people that have been waiting for those colder temperatures. They're definitely on the table as that negative EPO really dips and allows that colder Arctic air to sink further south as we head into your Friday and your Saturday time frame. So for the next 5 days, you can actually see where that colder air mass will be in place, with much of the eastern 2/3 of the U.S. with well below average temperatures, and much of the central U.S. just about average to slightly above average. But where that ridge is locked in place for much of the west, much of the northwest, much of British Columbia here, well above average temperatures. But all that just kind of flips in a big way heading into next week. But let's take a look at the overall rain aspects between now and going into your weekend for much of the country, which you've been experiencing drier conditions for much of Texas, Oklahoma, much of the deep south here in the southeast, back into Florida, where they desperately don't need any rain. They're going to be able to, clean up whatever they can, as, with all that devastating impacts that left with Ian. It's just really heartbreaking to see what took place with Ian down there. But at least they'll have clearer skies to work with and not have to worry about rain or any more storms on the way, at least for now. But for the rest of the country, we do see that Four Corners region, complements of monsoonal flow still, and the remnants of what was Orleans still bringing some rains for portions of New Mexico. That'll actually spread in the panhandle of Texas, while much of the west is still locked under that ridge of high pressure between now and the end of this weekend. But now let's head to the tropics, because there are two systems that we have to look out for. This now has an 80% chance of developing over the next 2 to 5 days. And this also has another 40% chance of a new, what's labeled now as Invest 91L, will be continuing westbound for the next 5 days. But underneath that 80% chance of development, most guidance actually has this developing into tropical storm Julia. But the good thing about Julia, will just basically take a name and will be well out to sea in the open waters, and that's supposed to be lifting well out to sea and become more or less a fish storm. But what won't be a fish storm is what will be what is 91L. So right now it looks pretty formidable. It's got a 40% chance of developing. A lot of the models actually do have this forming into at least a tropical system. If it does, it will likely take the name Carl after Julia's form. But look at the timeline. I mean, it's still got a ways to go tracking this system. We do have a subtropical ridge further to the north will be pushing this westbound. So what as it looks like right now, at least I think the United States is clear, whatever may be to come from 91L, but won't be clear is the Western Caribbean and portions of Honduras, potentially into Yucatan. But look at the time frame here with that 96. Those are hours. That gives you an idea of where this infest may be 4 days from now, 125 days from now, potentially just south of Jamaica. So we'll be tracking this system as it continues westbound in the days to come. But yeah, further to the north, we're going to be looking at a healthier snowpack between now and the time we get into Monday and Tuesday of next week, well up into Siberia, back into Alaska. That's going to set the stage for our first initial push of our developing snowstorm that will take place into next week. So you can definitely see, let's take a look at the overall teleconnections. It's just going to be a drastic flick from this week going into next week, because this week we've got the positive P&A in place with those well above average temperatures in much of the Pacific Northwest. But by the time we get into the 11th of the month, 12th, 13th of October, notice the drastic nosedive in the jet stream and the teleconnections with the P&A. That sends it negative. That's able to pull that colder air with all that snowpack well to the north, and that's going to send definitely the coldest temperatures of the season and some snow along with it. So, but underneath that, look at the vorticity that's going to be forming by the time we get into Wednesday, your October the 12th. I think Tuesday, Wednesday, it really starts to deepen for much of the Pacific Northwest, bringing down that cold Arctic air. Look at the tight isobars. And underneath that, that's going to be very heavy winds. Typically to the north of that, it's going to be cold enough to snow, and that continues to shift southbound. And that'll be setting up over portions of Nevada, and even portions of California probably actually will get some rain by then. This will be by next Thursday, October the 13th, 14th timeframe. But underneath that, that's will be the culprit to potentially open up the door for the Gulf of Mexico. And by then, we could be looking at, look at the isobars by the time we get into that Thursday of next week. A little bit of a change for portions of the central U.S. back into Texas, Oklahoma, Kansas. Those areas might be actually talking about some rain moving back in the picture, which they desperately needed. But underneath that low pressure, that's going to bring big changes with definitely some Arctic air and potentially the coldest temperatures of the season for a good chunk of Idaho, Montana, much of Nevada, Utah, back into Wyoming, with well below average temperatures for them. And it's going to bring probably the first significant snowstorm on the way for many areas, the more at least widespread. A lot of this will be in the higher elevations, but some of this snow will sink a little bit further south. So places into portions of Washington, Montana, back into Wyoming, going into Idaho, Nevada, even to the Sahara Nevada should pick up some snow with this system. Utah back into portions of Colorado, as well as Wyoming, really should be picking up the highest snow amounts from this particular system. But for next week, here's your rain aspects from that system, from that low pressure system that's coming in on Monday through Thursday of next week. Yeah, that's actually some rain we get to talk about in the Northwest. We're seeing slow signs of things changing, and I think by the 20th you'll be really locked in, starting in with the atmospheric river. But what's also good, we will gonna bring some health and some rains back into the picture. This won't be until the middle of next week, right? So I'm just kind of showing you what may be on the table for next week for these areas back into Southern California. Yeah, these areas back into Texas, North Texas. This probably won't be until Thursday of next week, but we could be talking about rain again, moving back into the picture for them, back into Oklahoma, back into the central U.S. where they've been bone dry as of late. So I appreciate you guys watching. Do like this video. Definitely leave your comments below. And don't forget to subscribe to my channel. Catch the latest update while I protect you before and after the storm.